The WTO ministerial meeting in Geneva on the 15th to 17th of December is taking place at a really rather critical time. What has happened is that over the course of the last 10 years, since the launch of the Doha round, the WTO has failed to conclude these negotiations and has in the process seen a considerable decrease in its legitimacy, credibility and authority. What we've seen instead is the rise of preferential trade agreements, regional agreements, bilateral agreements that all, in a way, weaken the multilateral trading system. So recognizing that the Doha round is not likely to be concluded in the foreseeable future, at the Cannes summit, the G20 leaders instructed their trade ministers when they meet to come up with fresh and credible approaches, these are the exact words, fresh and credible approaches to addressing the multilateral trading system in the context of the kind of global economic environment we have at the moment. I think one of the things that needs to be stressed is that the world has moved on immensely since 2001 when the Doha round was launched. There are many new members in the WTO, production processes have changed, there's the rise of the supply chain, which is making it increasingly difficult to determine in what countries a particular product has been produced. And yet trade data on which trade negotiators work continue to reflect a narrative which is becoming increasingly obsolete. So there's a need, for one thing, to come to terms with the reality as it is rapidly evolving, and thereby to develop really fresh and credible approaches. The point I think that's very important to bear in mind is that the WTO is a much more diverse and populated institution than it was when it was first established in 1995. In 1995, the number of countries that were members was about 90. At present, it's about 155 and counting, which is a good thing, which means that there are many countries, and the latest is Russia, that perceive the necessity of being part of a rules-based multilateral trading system. That's the good news, and it's important good news. The bad news is that they've not been able to cooperate sufficiently in order to move forward on the basis of the mandate that has been in place since Doha, the meeting in Doha in 2001. And this is partly a reflection of the diversity. All of these countries that are members of the WTO have an interest in trade, but have different levels of capability, different levels of engagement. The WTO works on the basis of consensus and what's called a single undertaking. So nothing's agreed until everything is agreed. And that's been a major stumbling block. I think in order to unleash and to come up with fresh and credible approaches, what would be, I think, especially appropriate would be to take a page out of the APEC book, which when it was working in the early 1990s developed this concept of open regionalism. In other words, that members of APEC would proceed with the unilateral liberalizing of their markets, and others were encouraged to do so on a voluntary basis, so that instead of creating a closed club, it was an open club saying, you know, the more members join, fine, but at your own pace, in your own time. And I think what we would like to see, I think what would be very interesting is to transform this concept of open regionalism into open globalism, so that we could see, if you like, a process moving ahead, not closed, not exclusionary, not discriminatory, but simply telling countries that they can join at the right time when they feel it's appropriate in order for them to do so, in having the right kinds of capabilities to ensure that they're going to be able to be to benefit from this more open global market space.